Imagine the rain has been falling for 3 days. You're sitting inside a dark cave, soaked, hungry, and listening to water roar somewhere outside. Your food is running low, your clothes are wet, and the fire in front of you is getting smaller. You know that if it dies, you're in serious trouble. But here's the strangest part. You can't leave. The ground outside is turning into mud, the rivers are rising, the animals you were tracking have disappeared. So what do? You wait. But ancient humans didn't just sit there doing nothing. They started making things. They started teaching. They started telling stories. And those miserable days, trapped inside, may have helped turn humans into the most adaptable animal on Earth. For us, rain usually means changing plans. For an ancient hunter, it could change the entire landscape. The trail you followed yesterday could disappear beneath flowing water. A path across a rocky hillside could become dangerously slippery. A small stream could suddenly become a violent barrier. And if you were barefoot or wearing primitive footwear, one bad step could mean an injury you couldn't simply treat with a trip to the pharmacy. Then there was the cold. Getting wet isn't just uncomfortable. Your body can lose heat rapidly when you're exposed to cold wind and rain. And if you're already hungry, exhausted, and carrying little protection from the weather, staying warm becomes a survival problem. So your group retreats into whatever shelter the landscape provides. A cave, a rock overhang, a temporary shelter made from whatever materials you have. Outside, the rain keeps falling. Inside, everyone waits, and now the most important thing in the entire shelter becomes the thing burning in front of you. The fire isn't decoration. It's your heater, your kitchen, your light, and one of the few things separating your group from the darkness outside. So someone has to protect it. They search for fuel that hasn't become completely soaked. They move the fire deeper beneath the shelter. They shield it from wind. They feed it carefully, because once a fire disappears, starting another one isn't as simple as reaching into your pocket. Ancient humans learned to preserve embers and carry fire from place to place. Some groups could transport glowing material inside bark, leaves, fungus, or other natural tinder. Think about what that means. A tiny glowing ember could be more valuable than an entire pile of wet wood, because that little ember represented warmth, cooked food, light, and safety. So, while the rain hammered the rocks outside, one person might spend hours doing something that sounds incredibly boring, keeping a tiny flame alive. And that boring job could keep everyone else alive too. But eventually the fire is stable, everyone is relatively safe, and the rain is still coming down. So what happens next? You work. A damaged stone tool can be repaired. A sharp edge can be reshaped. A hide can be prepared. A spear can be checked. Something that was broken yesterday can become useful again today. So this is one of the most interesting things about being trapped. When you can't move forward physically, you can still improve what you're carrying with you. And prehistoric shelters contain evidence that humans repeatedly used these protected spaces for manufacturing and tool production. Imagine sitting beside a fire, striking stone against stone while rain pounds the entrance. Chip, chip, chip. Every piece that flies away changes the shape of the tool. You aren't hunting, you aren't traveling, but you're preparing for the moment when you can. And sometimes the most important invention begins with nothing more exciting than having time to experiment. Take something incredibly simple. String. Today you probably wouldn't think twice about it. But once humans learned how to make strong fibers into cordage, an enormous number of possibilities appeared. You could tie objects together, secure shelter materials, attach tools to handles, make traps, carry things more efficiently, create nets and bindings. String is basically a way of turning separate objects into one system. But making it requires patience. You twist fibers together, you tighten them, You repeat the process again and again. It's not the sort of job you do while running across a landscape. It's the sort of job you can do while sitting beside a fire for hours. And the same principle applies to clothing. When you have time, you can repair what protects you from the next cold night. So the rain may have stopped the hunt, but it didn't stop preparation. But tools weren't the only things being made. Something else was happening inside the shelter. People were talking. An experienced hunter could explain how to recognize an animal's tracks. Someone could teach a child which plants were safe. Someone else could remember where water was found during the dry season. Another person might know which stone produced the best cutting edge. This information couldn't be Googled. It couldn't be written down. It existed inside people's memories, and the only way to preserve it was to pass it from one person to another. A rainy day gave people something precious, time together. The older generation could teach the younger generation. The younger generation could watch, copy, practice, and eventually teach someone else. And suddenly, sitting around a fire wasn't wasted time. It was education. And once the practical lessons were finished, people could keep talking. They could tell stories, make jokes, remember ancestors, describe distant places, explain strange sounds, tell children what dangers waited beyond the familiar landscape. Think about what a story can do. A good story can make a piece of information easier to remember. Instead of saying, "Don't go near that valley," you tell a story about what happened to someone who did. Instead of listing every dangerous animal, you describe an encounter people remember for years. The fire becomes more than warmth. It becomes a place where knowledge, memory, and imagination are shared. And that may be one reason human groups could preserve information across generations. The storm outside was temporary, but the information being exchanged inside could survive for decades. But here's where the story gets interesting. Rain wasn't always the enemy. Sometimes rain created opportunities. After a storm, wet ground can preserve footprints. An animal that was difficult to track yesterday might leave a clear trail today. Rain also fills natural depressions with water. Plants respond to moisture. Some insects become more active. Certain foods become easier to find. So an experienced hunter didn't necessarily see rain as simply good or bad. They learned to ask a better question. What has the rain changed? That's a very human survival skill. You don't control the environment, you observe it. Then you adapt. A storm could close one route while opening another. It could make hunting harder today, but tracking easier tomorrow. It could change where animals moved and where food appeared. The people who understood those patterns gained an advantage. And now we reach the strangest possibility. Maybe some of humanity's greatest advantages weren't created during moments of action. Maybe they were created during moments when action was impossible. Rain forced people to stop traveling. Stopping created time. Time allowed them to repair tools, to experiment, to make clothing, to prepare materials, to teach children, to exchange information, to tell stories, and to simply sit together long enough for ideas to move from one mind to another. Nobody sitting beside a prehistoric fire knew they were contributing to thousands of years of human development. They were just waiting for the weather to change. But one small improvement could make tomorrow's hunt easier. One lesson could prevent an injury. One story could preserve knowledge. One tool could be copied by another person, and then another. And another. That's how culture grows. Not necessarily in one giant moment, but through thousands of tiny moments repeated across generations. Eventually the rain stops, the fire survived, the tools are ready, the clothing has been repaired, the group steps outside, the ground is soft beneath their feet, and everywhere they look the landscape has changed. There are fresh tracks, new water, different smells, new opportunities. The storm that trapped them yesterday has become information today. And maybe that's the real lesson. Ancient humans didn't survive because nature was kind to them. They survived because they learned how to adapt when nature wasn't. They couldn't stop the rain, they couldn't control the cold, they couldn't make the animals wait, but they could use the time, they could learn, they could create, they could teach. And perhaps that's one of the most human things about us. When the world forces us to stop, we find something to build,